The annual deliveries have a not insiderable handicap, the basis of the previous year. That past experience acts as a double-edged sword that acts as the configurator of the new game, and, normally, there can't be too many changes. If there are, the developer runs the risk of losing part of its community, being told to NBA 2K21 and modifying its shooting system. But if there are none, how can we justify the purchase of the new delivery, beyond the licenses, when we are talking about an outlay that can easily be around €18? Of this knows quite a lot 2K, and also Electronic Arts, which already began long ago to imitate its practices. The modes are the ideal refuge, and the launch of a story mode, which provides a plot and a background with which to play in future installments, is a candy the sea of appetizing. In those we are with F1 2021, an excellent Formula 1 video game on the track, like the 2020 edition, which bases almost all its novelties on the expansion of the options of its modes and on the addition of Breaking Point, the dessert that aims to satiate the diner after a patchwork of delicious, well-prepared dishes. But of course, having a story is not the same as having to tell a story, and that's where the problems begin. The sequences introduced in the races function as triggers of the plot that develops Breaking Point, an interesting starting point. Breaking Point is ready to tell us, in principle, the trajectory of a young driver who has just landed in Formula 1. After a brief prologue that puts us in background on his achievements in the competitive F2, the system invites us to choose between one of the 5 available teams. In my case, I opted for Racing Point, so that I could see the transformation of the team into the Aston Martin F1 team. That is, from the outset, we are aware that we are going to live more than one season in the skin of Aiden Jackson, the protagonist. The initial approach is interesting. At the Racing Point facility we are greeted by Brian Doyle, the liaison with the team principal and the person who will act as direct boss. It serves to place the player both in the paddock and in the playing environment, presenting, in each grand prize, both the situation of the team and its trajectory throughout the season. It also has its weight in the plot, in which we will witness how he tries to act as a balm to appease the tense relationship between Jackson and his veteran teammate, Casper Cass Ackerman, the third leg of the bench. The faces of the characters are at a great level. Ackerman is a living legend of F1, a driver in years who is in the twilight of his career. The admiration that Aiden feels for his teammate does not prevent the competitiveness between the two from ending up generating an insane rivalry, which puts on the table the great theme of the story that we are intended to tell. The clash between the impetuosity of youth and the experience of the years, the frictions between the one who has just arrived and the consolidated figure. Something that is powerfully reminiscent of what happened between Alonso and Hamilton at McLaren, back in 2007. F1 2021 story mode proves that more doesn't mean better. From this interesting starting point we live the development of the season, through the different Grands Prix, without contesting all the tests of each weekend. As soon as we start a race with 7 laps to go, in which the goal is to reach our teammate, as we are placed in another in which we have just punctured a wheel and we must reach boxes to change it, and, in the next, they allow us to complete all the laps of it. Meanwhile, we watch as that rivalry grows inexorably. The rivalry between the two drivers of the same team is the big issue to be dealt with in the new history mode of F1 2021. In this sense, I like how the game takes us to the track, but another thing is what is said when we leave it and how it is said. The dialogues are, without a doubt, the worst not only of this mode, but of the whole game. The surprising technical power that the title shows in its video scenes, both in those referring to the competition and in those built with close-ups of the characters, is tarnished in its text. The conflict, which is very appetizing from the outset, and which reserves some pleasant surprises for the future, is marred by a text full of clichés, useless advice, disjointed phrases and personality profiles ranging from the incoherent to the absurd. An example of this is Devin Butler, a pilot whose only function is bad to poke and touch their noses, something he does through childish and puerile arguments and manipulations until he says enough is enough, throwing away any possibility of generating real involvement in the player. All this has led me to wonder how positive the addition of a story mode in this type of video game can be. It might seem that their mere presence is already news to be celebrated, and I think that is a dangerous attitude that leads to results like this. A bland story that completely wastes the excellent material it has because its raison d'etre, its ultimate goal, is not to tell us something through the steering wheel of a spectacular Formula One. It is to appear in advertising banners as the main claim for the purchase of this new edition. It is too noticeable, and that claim should meet certain minimums that have not been reached here, so far. Beyond this year's main claim, Codemasters continues to reign behind the wheel. If we ignore the bad news related to Breaking Point, we come across the quality that Codemasters usually shows year after year. Being technically very similar to what was seen in the previous edition, the first big contribution is the Expert mode, the counterpart to last year's Casual mode, which makes things even more difficult for experienced players. The complexity rises to unknown heights with an interface that allows us to see and manage parameters that until now had not been paid attention. Its impact is not as great as that of the Casual mode, which brought the series closer to all kinds of users, but it is a good incentive for the player looking for greater complexity. On the other hand, Career mode now allows us to play alongside a friend, and it also does so with different variables. We can start our professional career in company being part of the same team and competing for the Constructors' Championship, having to share the strategies and adjustments. Or we can sign for different teams disputing not only the positions on the track, but also the contracts to choose depending on our achievements. The feelings behind the wheel are still as good as usual in the franchise. The cars are pure nerve when you disable the steering aids. For its part, Real Season Start proposes us to fully enter the current F1 World Championship. This modality invites us to replace a real driver of the grid, inheriting his accumulated points and being able to start from any Grand Prix that has already taken place. Our game will be involved in the events and results that have been taking place in the Royal Championship, and we, as luxury guests, will have to fight to overcome the results obtained by the chosen driver. Without a doubt, a pretty interesting way to approach the competition. The last big news has to do with the My Team mode, which receives the department events, intended to complicate our task as team managers a little more. These are critical events that, during a Grand Prix, will affect different sections of the team, forcing us to make key decisions for the team's drift. An addition that brings a distinctive touch compared to what was seen last year, but that is not essential. The circuits look spectacular both in the panoramic presentation and from the car itself. More can be less. Acquiring an overview of the product, there is no denying that its great contribution, the Trojan horse used by the developer to introduce this new installment in the homes of players, is Breaking Point, its story mode. And this is a claim that will surely work at the sales level. It's very sweet, in my case. For example, I picked it up with a lot of desire. But it is so far from the rest of the sections of the game that it does not go beyond there. It is a mere advertising claim that tells us, without grace, a predictable story. Otherwise, the game performs as well as it has so far, which is remarkable, but also to be expected. The base was already there and again proves that when it comes to going out on the track, the boys of Southam are still the kings and, in addition, they put at a disposal a series of options that allow players of all levels to enter the complex world of F1. To all this we should add the great work done when it comes to taking advantage of the benefits of DualSense. Undoubtedly one of the most pleasant surprises. The additions of any annual series should have an entity that goes beyond mere advertising action. That's why I hope Breaking Point improves for future installments. Right now it's a novelty, one more element to add to the F1 2021 offering, and that's its only value not having existed before. Personally, if this is to be done, it is better not to do so. Pros? The multiple options when it comes to setting up the driving experience. The number of modes that the franchise has been accumulating over the last few years. The sensations behind the wheel and the race dynamics. The game that takes advantage of the DualSense. Cons. Breaking Point is an addition that does not live up to the rest of the product, hurting the rest of the set. In the middle levels of difficulty it can be too easy for an experienced player. The verdict. F1 2021 is once again crowned as the best way to approach F1 that the game has given us to date. At the wheel, it delivers sensations practically identical to those experienced last year, adding several novelties to its main modalities and delivering Breaking Point, a story mode that is its great asset to conquer players this year. But that does not live up to the levels of quality to which the rest of the game reaches. The story modes of sports games should start to take more into account the stories they want to tell us. If not, they better not come.